But imagine that it's back in 1982. I have been collecting all these documents, pieces of paper. I have basically I have a stack of paper about a foot high. This is when we still used paper. And when I was using a computer, they used a DOS operating system. And
Yeah.
I'm basically collecting information for my master's program. And my father, grandfather, and brother, all medical doctors. I'm pretty well developed left brain. I'm going to be the first guy who puts all this stuff together and going to come up with a specific frequency or frequencies for the organs, for the chakras, you name it, because I had it all there. And I began collecting this information and putting it all together, and all of a sudden, I'm in a state of intellectual angst. I remember sitting back and forth, rocking with my head in my hands, because none of the information correlated. You would have spiritual master A using a particular set of mantras for chakras, and spiritual master B using very different mantras. You would have Dr. X using a particular set of frequencies for one organ, Dr. Y using a completely different set of frequencies for the same organ. And I said, how can this be? How can this be? And Paul, this was at a time before anybody heard of sound healing in the mainstream. These people were sharing this stuff with me out of love. And hey, I've been doing this, and this is what I found. And I've been doing this. And it didn't make sense. And I'm a little bit freaked. And all of a sudden I hear this inner voice, and it says, it is not only the frequency of the sound that makes its effect, it is also the intention of the person making and receiving the sound. And it was like a light went off, and I wrote down the words frequency plus intent equals healing. I wrote that in the early 1980s. It is more relevant now than ever. But imagine what it's like when I've had this huge aha, and I'm now at these scientific and musical medical conferences, and I'm talking to these different doctors. I'm saying, hey, have you ever thought of the importance of intentionality? And they looked at me like I was from another planet, which I will repeat, Paul, but nevertheless, it was really, really difficult. And then, blessed be, you have people like Bruce Lipton writing his Biology of Belief, or Joe Dispenza doing the placebo effect, or Masaru Emoto doing his work with water. You got Lynn McTaggart doing her intention experiments. You got on and on. And it's so great now to be able to talk about the importance of intentionality, because we're now on the same page as opposed to this separation between consciousness and reality. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Totally. And I think, one of the challenges, I own an institute, and I spent years and years looking into science and research on everything.
Mm-hmm.
And what you'll find is no matter what topic you look into, if you start searching the scientific literature or general literature, you'll always find people with equal qualifications that are diametrically opposed on almost everything. Whether is cold water showers good for you, or is a vegetarian diet good for you? You name it. And so, what I tell my students is, I quote Steiner in his Structure of the Soul, and Steiner says in his teachings that this is inherently going to happen, but whenever that happens, it's your soul calling you to investigate for yourself. And he says only when you ask honest questions and answer them yourself do you activate what he calls the awareness soul, so that you go out of being programmed and into having your own authentic experience and identifying what's true for you as an individual. So I think it's very important. Your story makes this an important point. And, you investigated this for yourself and came to the truth, which now lots of people agree with. But I think it's important for everyone to know, whenever you get conflicting advice, you don't just go with the expert that appeases you or is most in line with your dogma. You got to go inside of yourself and really seek to find the answers to the questions. And for me, when I studied sound healing, which I have for many years, is I've always tested things on myself, whether it be tuning forks or my own voice, or I've taken courses on mantra and practice and say, okay, what's being affected in me? Do I feel that in my liver? Do I feel it in my heart? And I think that's the important thing, is to engage the experience instead of just trusting somebody else to tell you what's real, or you can have a lot of beliefs that are contradictory to what you really actually need for your own medicine, so to speak.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love it. I like to say we are our own best laboratory.
Amen.
And I want to say that this brings us to the third secret of sound healing, the third pillar, if you like, of sound healing, which is that we are all unique vibratory beings. And when I oftentimes would begin a workshop, I would ask, okay, how many of you are allergic to penicillin? And Paul, anywhere from 5% to 20% to sometimes even more, depending upon the group, would raise their hand. I said, okay, if we perceive that everything in the universe is vibration, then penicillin can be perceived of as a series of frequencies. That for 80% of you or more is a healing vibration, but for 5 to 20% of you is toxic. And I think this is an incredible metaphor for almost everything I have ever found. I simply have not found anything, whether it's a sound or a substance, a food, what have you, that is going to work for everybody the same way. Have you?
Not other than breath and water.
All right, breath and water. Yes, I was thinking about that. That's true. Breath and water, yes.
But yes, your point is well taken. I mean, aside from the four elements and the fact that we all need space and imbibe ourselves in consciousness, everything is so absolutely unique. And in my teachings on diet, I make the very important point and show many methods for fine-tuning your diet and listening to your body and not following diet books and diet experts, because you can expert yourself into a disease.
There you go.
And so I think, these are very, and that's one of the problems that we have. We still have people that don't trust their own inner experience or their own inner guidance. And so they keep reaching out for some kind of mommy or daddy figure to tell them what to do. But it's really important, I think, to grow up and take responsibility for our need to find out, certain drugs don't work for certain people, certain foods, certain medicines, as you're implying. And I think a lot of people get themselves into a lot of trouble with their health and even their mental, emotional well-being because they are not paying attention to what their own inner consciousness or their own body is telling them instead of listening to somebody else. And I think that's really an important concept across the board, as well as with sound.
I mean, what if we empowered ourselves to honor this? And what if we take a supplement, hear a sound, do something, and have a bad experience and go, wow, that didn't resonate with me? And I'm not talking about trying a new food and going, nah, I don't like that. I'm talking about literally eating some food and becoming violently ill. I mean, how brilliant would it be if we somehow were able to empower ourselves to go, well, that didn't work for me. I'll try something else. There is this incredible smorgasbord of sound. There's this smorgasbord of food. There are all sorts of different things, and probably we can find something that does help put us in balance and allows us to have some sort of sovereignty for ourselves. What do you think of that?
I think that's where we've got to go, because if we don't start with our own body, we're never going to have the intestinal fortitude to stand up for ourselves as a family or as a society or as a nation or as a culture, which is critical in the world right now. I mean, it all begins with the individual. Any group of people is a collection of individuals, and if they're all still stuck in the child archetype, feeding off somebody else's breast without thinking for themselves, we're in deep trouble.
And I think, as you were saying before, that, once you experience something, once you use yourself as a laboratory and you experience it, whether it's sound or whatever, because sound can be a wonderful metaphor for a lot of different things. But once you experience it, then it's real for you. That's why we can read tons and tons of books, millions of words. But as I like to say, if they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, a sound is worth an encyclopedic amount of pictures. So, once you've really experienced something, because otherwise it's just a mental plane construct and it's not real for us.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Now, there's a couple things I want to get into, but I want to let you finish your four pillars, because those
the
are
last one. I'm sorry. I'm having such a good time with this conversation. The last one, and this is one, Paul, that is going to seem so simple. And it took me probably 15 plus years to learn it. And that is this: silence is golden. Silence is the place where the true vibrational resonances of the sounds we experience have the time to assimilate and basically manifest, shift, and change. I like to say that silence is the yin to the yang of sound.
Yes.
And that indeed, if you think about it, the word silent and the words listen are anagrams. Almost as though we have to listen within, in that place of stillness, to get really, as you were saying, that sort of direct guidance for ourselves. And it's something so many people in the field of sound become so enamored with the great bliss of how great it feels to play music and sing and do this and that they don't understand the importance of silence, because silence is really the key. If you don't allow proper, adequate silence to basically accompany the sound, you're not doing it justice. So when we do sound activities, we'll usually do almost an equal amount of silent time to assimilate the experience.